Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the first episode of VR Roundup, guys. So stoked. Last few days, just having those off away from the daily grind, giving me the creative free time. Hopefully you guys are pleased with the end results as viewers, as Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much. Quick 101, in case you haven't seen the updates, there's going to be a Tuesday and Friday edition of VR Roundup. Miscellaneous shows like Virtual Reality A to Z, they're going to have a whatever day release schedule. Could be Monday, could be Sunday. I'm going to try to not line it up on the same day so that there's content throughout the week. I wanted to keep it unique because I was pretty much the only daily news show. There's already weekly ones and monthly ones. I think twice a week strikes a perfect balance. We'll wait and see and find out. It'll be for you guys to judge. So let me know in the comments, guys. And with that said, so stoked. Let's get started. First story. Talked about the price drop for the Oculus Rift Touch Bundle. This was back to the summer of Rift price of $399 US. The problem was that bit of a gap in between when it temporarily went up before they announced it was going back down. Road to VR has a fantastic article on that. Now, not everybody is comfortable doing returns. I don't see this as a return. It's not. It's really price protection. If you purchase this through a credit card company, check. A lot of credit cards offer price protection. Yours might be one of them. If it was Best Buy, Newegg, they're pretty good with that as well, 15 to 30 days. Amazon, likewise, but I think theirs is a little bit shorter. What I'm saying is check into it. That $100 difference is better off in your wallet than it is in theirs. You can use that for, peripherals, accessories, and of course, VR games, which is awesome. So yeah, take a look, see if you can't get that difference paid if you were one of those people who purchased it during that chunk of time. And next up, after many months of anticipation, the day finally here for Microsoft and its various virtual reality partners, Acer, Lenovo, Dell, HP, all launching their various Windows VR solutions today. We've talked about the prices. They range from $399 US to $449. And of course, we looked at the Samsung unit, which really is a premium version of the Windows VR headset. That one slightly more. It's going to come in at $499 US. And of course, as we mentioned when we talked about it, that won't be until November. So they've staggered the release for that by a couple of weeks. And while Rift and Vive have selected the outside-in tracking, of course, Windows opting for inside-out. There's some advantages to that. Absolutely. But one of the big negatives is the tracking of the controller. The problem is your occlusion with 6 degree of freedom controllers using that method where your HMD, your headset, is responsible for the tracking. It creates not a tracking nightmare, just a lot of gaps where the Rift and Vive don't have any. In comparison, those same areas will be occluded areas on the Windows set, not so with the Rift or Vive. They've got their own, but we're talking not a lot of cases. You've really got to hold the controller tight and purposely move away from your camera or your infrared detector in such a way that really they can't see it. Those areas with the Windows headsets, much more numerous. So hopefully they come out with some type of a solution. I had wished and hoped that they would sell their sets with some kind of just sensor for the controllers themselves. But I understand why they didn't, because if you're going to go down that path, well, then you might as well do outside-in tracking, which they purposely have avoided. So time, that's what it's going to take. Time will tell if inside out is going to work. My gut, though, tells me, guys, it's going to be problematic. And I've talked before about formats winning out and how initially we just want VR to succeed. And we do, but we also want the right type of technology to succeed. And part of me really hopes It's a big part that Microsoft addresses this tracking deficiency, because if they do become the majority, the monopoly on VR solutions for PC, well, we'll have given up a lot in the tracking department. Next up, we've got Alvo, a new virtual reality first-person shooter from developers Marden Paul. They are the devs behind the game Quiz Night Tonight. The game aspires to be VR's Counter-Strike, and that is a freaking lofty goal because there's not a lot of Counter-Strikes out there, i.e. a multiplayer military close quarters combat game for modern warfare in virtual reality. In the trailer, you see a lot of potential, but I don't want to personally get too excited until I see something released, concrete, hands-on. A definite plus is that not only is it going to be available for all 3 platforms, Rift, Vive, PlayStation VR, the major platforms that is, it's also going to be cross-platform compatible. It's going to release in 2018. It's going to have 3 modes. Search and Destroy, that's 2 teams of 5 players. Basically, think of this as a reverse capture the flag. Instead of capturing a flag and bringing it back, you're planting a bomb on the other team's base. Then there's free-for-all deathmatch. Pretty typical, not much needs to be said there. And then the third mode, Domination. You're going to have to capture a certain number of control points and hold them for victory. And then next up, we've got the game Red Matter. And this is an interesting looking game. It's from a Madrid, Spain-based studio. They're called Vertical Robot. It's got a really unique art style. Love the atmosphere from what I've seen. The design director, Tatiana Delgado, she describes it as follows: a cross between the encroaching surveillance of George Orwell's dystopian societies and Kafka's absurd bureaucracy. If you're scratching your head, the layman's explanation from me would be, it is to today's Russia what Fallout 4 is to today's USA. That kind of 1950s future post-apocalyptic world, just the Russian version of that. Now, this one does take place on an alien planet. There's a little or quite a bit of fantasy involved. You are an astronaut from the Atlantic Union who is investigating a top secret research project. The game's going to use as a mechanic low gravity, and I've tried this in Borderlands. They had some DLC content that used this. Was it DLC or a release? Either way, it works, but really more of a novelty, kind of wears a little thin as a gameplay mechanic that you use throughout the whole game. Hopefully not the case here. They managed to kind of inject it with some innovation as well. Devs are aiming for about 2.5 to 3 hours of length. No firm launch dates yet. Hopefully, with some added content, they can get that in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 hours. But for now, 2.5 to 3. Next up, some new images released for Resident Evil 7 DLC. So there's 2 DLC packs. We've talked about them before. Not a Hero and End of Zoe. Both planned for release in December. Not a Hero is going to be free DLC, but End of Zoe, that's going to set you back about $12 to $15 US. The other option is going to be a Biohazard Gold Edition. That's going to include both of those and, of course, the banned footage 1 and 2. That's going to release December 12th. No firm price on that one. What I love about, well, at least one of the DLCs is the chance to play the veteran character Chris Redfield. I think that's going to be pretty cool. Really stoked about that one. And this next story, Million Arthur VR. Kind of the reviews not looking so good for this game. Not just organizations, magazines, websites that have reviewed the game, but user feedback. It's been pretty abysmal. And I've said many, many times that just because you don't like a certain playstyle outside of VR doesn't mean you're not going to like it in VR. Sometimes that change just to virtual reality works out so well that it breathes new life. And I think it does that with stuff like platformers, for example. I was so sick to death of platformers. And yet Lucky's Tale, even though it was pretty meh in terms of gameplay, etc. I found it was the VR aspect that made it feel fresh, new, exciting, at least to me. And I think there's all kinds of potential for genres. However, with that said, there's the reverse of that. A game that just, it's utter crap no matter what. And VR certainly not helping that. Million Arthur VR kind of falling in that category based on everything I've read. Still want to try this game for myself, give it my own judgment. But what I'm reading, what I'm hearing is that really virtual reality does not benefit the game in any way. It's a card battler game, and it may as well have just been done in 2D. And I can see where they're coming from, even though I want to still try it for my own judgment. I get that. I get what they mean by that. And Lucky's Tale, like I said, it managed to innovate. This one sounds like it was just a bit of a lazy port into virtual reality. And we're going to run that. We're going to run that risk with lots of titles. And for every good game like Doom BFG that gets converted to VR, there's going to be some stinkers. And hopefully less stinkers and more good quality content. But let me know, guys, any of you that have purchased Million Arthur VR. And I know there's one of you, can't remember who, that I've got on chat, but I'll be asking you about that. I definitely want your feedback as well. And then where I wanted to end things, guys, the PlayStation VR had its first birthday. This was part of the Friday show that I never released, so I wanted to talk about it quickly. What the PlayStation VR has meant for me, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. So for me, two things. And the first one has to do with mass adoption. And it would be probably the biggest weakness, the glaring weakness in a sense for the PlayStation VR is, of course, its tracking, which puts it firmly in third place of the big three VR solutions. While it was a negative, it wasn't huge because the games that it did have were 180 degree, front facing, and those pretty much tight. Thumper, for example, Rez, and of course, Resident Evil 7. Easily one of my favorite virtual reality games, period. Plus the fact that it's a horror game, a genre that I really, really like, survival horror. It just fired on all cylinders for me and did not need room scale in the least. I think it worked really well given the limitations of that. So while it's a negative kind of overall because it doesn't ultimately give them that flexibility and that capability, they're not hampered by it if developers develop to its strengths. And that's certainly what was done with Resident Evil 7. The other game that got released is Raw Data, and I've talked about this one so much, probably sick of hearing me about it, but if you haven't heard me talking about it, you have a PlayStation VR, this, where I just talked about, even if you're sick of FPS games, give Raw Data a chance. It's a fantastic, tight game, and everything I've heard is the PlayStation VR port every bit as good. Give it a shot. Thank me later. All right, guys, that is the end of this first episode of VR Roundup. I will catch you guys for the Game and Friday edition, which will be episode 2. Guys, cheers.